Okay, this time we're going to be looking at urbanisation, so it's a geography unit, and we're looking at how people are attracted to cities or not. So this is a quick introduction to what is urbanisation. Basically, dictionary.com, urban means of or relating to a city or town, and urbanisation is taking on the characteristics of a city. So urbanisation is the process of land becoming like a city or people becoming like a city. So, when we describe somebody as very urban, if we think back to town mouse and country mouse, it's about having certain city-like traits, if you like. This is a summary of about how what urban is. Feel free to pause. I'm just going to go through some of the highlights of this if you want to read all of them. So this is an interesting stat that more and more people are becoming more urban. So 2007 is estimated when that first happened. And then, of course, subsequently what comes with that, though, is that just under 1 in 3 people in urban areas globally live in a slum household. So that's like 33% of people, or 30% of people you live in a slum versus actually living in, the suburbs like we do or whatever. We're going to do a bit of work on that. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in this is that people tend to migrate from rural to urban areas as they become richer. And a part of that has to do with the kind of work that actually is involved in urban areas. And we're going to be talking about push and pull factors. So what pushes people towards cities and what pulls them towards cities. And some of that is actually about what sort of jobs you can get in the city versus what sort of jobs you can get in the rural areas or country areas. So there's this sort of mix between rural and urban and what sort of jobs you can get. And the last one, of course, is about living standards. And living standards means, how many TVs you have, basically, is a measure of living standard, which is, a worry, but there it is. So, in a city, you've got plumbing. You may have been down the coast and stayed in places down the coast or played in spaces elsewhere, and where they're on septic tanks. Septic tanks means it's actually a tank at that particular house. It doesn't mean that they've actually got main sewage like we do in Canberra, where you can flush a toilet and it goes somewhere. And you don't have to think about it again. In a place with a septic tank, you actually have to think about it again. It has to get emptied, and you have to take extra precautions with your plumbing system. So, there are still parts of Australia that don't have access to sewerage in a town type concept. So that's worth thinking about as well. But let's just talk about when all this happened. This is a cool graph. In fact, this is an amazing website, which I'm going to show you because it's going to make your assignment so easy. It does graphs for you. So you can see here, sort of 1800 is when cities really started to take off. And that has a lot to do with the Industrial Revolution. Now, you do the Industrial Revolution in Year 9, so I don't want to talk too much about it now, but I do love it, so it's going to come up. So with things like innovation and industry, you could actually help people to live in cities more easily. So before massive industry, you didn't have the jobs to support people in the cities. So more jobs were urban, and again, we're going to talk about that, rural. So we're going to be talking about that. But here you can see, Brazil leads the charge up the top, and you've got Eastern Africa down here, and the world is kind of in the middle, which kind of makes sense. So you can see here where people started to live in cities was about the 1800s, and then it's been a massive ramp up since then. So there's been this massive push towards living in cities, or massive urbanisation. These are some specific countries which I think were quite interesting. Australia and New Zealand, our data doesn't start until here. This is a really interesting way that they've collected the data through here, which is another reason why I like this website, because it does tell you where all their sources come from. This is a screenshot, so I can't click on that, but I'll be showing you some of that anyway. The other thing that I thought was interesting about here was Japan. Now, it's got this massive dip where it was becoming more urban, and then it dipped becoming more rural again, and then has gone back up to becoming more urban. And this was obviously the World War II. So at the end of World War II, not many people were left in the cities, or, people didn't, I'm assuming Hiroshima and Nagasaki play a big role in that. But this is, as a social scientist, these are the sort of data sets that are quite interesting. So when we see a massive drop like that, the question is well, why did that happen? And that gives us a question to go and have a look at. Again, with China here, you've got a bit of a dip and then you've got the massive increase. So again, it'd be, well, why did that dip happen? So this sort of data tells you quite interesting things when you graph it like this. And for your assignment, we do ask for some graphs. And a part of that is because in the social sciences, graphs give us that type of information. And it's interesting, so we can see different things. Start asking different questions. Let's talk about population density. So you may have done density in science. So some elements are more dense than others. Sorry, iron, for example, is quite dense. So if you picked up a piece of iron that was the same shape as a piece of cotton, for example, bad example, sorry, the iron is going to be substantially heavier, even though it's taking up the same sort of space, because it's denser. The molecules are basically closer together. That's what density means. Things are closer together. So here we can actually see population density. So this means how many people are living within a square kilometre. And a square kilometre is not very big. I'm trying to think of a comparable size. It's a kilometre by a kilometre. So, the Belconnen Mall might be a kilometre square. Anyway, we'll have to Google that. But here you can see 32,300 people live in 1 square kilometre in Mumbai. That's really dense. That's a lot of people living on top of each other. Sydney's down here at 2,000, and then the Chicago is the lowest that I did on this stats. It's 1,300. So then you can see how different people live in these cities. So, having a lot of people living on top of each other has some problems, and that's one of the things that you'll be looking at in your assignment. And that's it. So hopefully you've now got an idea about urbanisation. It's about cities. It's got positives and negatives, and one of the negatives can be density, how many people have to live in a city on top of each other.